In 1969, three black actors quietly broke into major Hollywood films at a time when most studios weren't even giving them auditions. None of them thanked a studio. None thanked a producer. Years later, one of them finally revealed the truth. The man who helped launch their careers was John Wayne, and he had ordered everyone involved to keep it secret. Here's how it started. October 1965. Paramount casting offices. A 23-year-old actor named William Foster is midway through an audition for a minor Western role when the casting director suddenly stops him. "We don't have anything for your type right now." Foster gathers his script and walks out. In the next room, John Wayne hears everything through a thin wall. He doesn't step in, doesn't argue, doesn't say a word. He simply puts on his hat and leaves. But that night, Wayne makes 3 phone calls. Over the next 4 years, he quietly funds an unofficial audition program, paying black actors to screen test when studios wouldn't. 31 actors go through the program. 3 launch major careers. And decades later, a single memo would reveal that Wayne had one condition from the beginning: don't use my name. By the end of the story, you'll see the document that proves it. Stay with me. By 1965, John Wayne wasn't just a movie star. He was Hollywood's most powerful Western icon. For nearly 2 decades, Wayne had built his reputation playing lawmen, soldiers, and cowboys. Films like Stagecoach, The Searchers, and Rio Bravo had turned him into more than an actor. He was a symbol of strength, tradition, and the old American West. But behind the scenes, Wayne had quietly built something else: influence. By the mid-1960s, Wayne wasn't just acting. He was producing through his company, Bad Jack Productions. That meant he wasn't only choosing roles anymore. He was helping decide who got hired, who got auditions, and who got their first break. And in Hollywood at the time, that kind of power mattered, because in 1965, the industry still operated under unwritten rules. Black actors were rarely cast in Westerns. When they were, the roles were small, background characters, side roles, or one-scene appearances. Leading roles were almost non-existent. Even auditions were limited. Many casting directors didn't say it publicly, but the message was understood. Opportunities weren't equal. Wayne had spent years inside this system. He knew how it worked. He knew who got called in, and who didn't. But until October 1965, the reality of it hadn't unfolded directly within earshot. At the time, Wayne was preparing meetings at Paramount Pictures. Westerns were still strong at the box office, and Wayne remained one of the studio's most reliable stars. His presence alone could greenlight projects. To many executives, Wayne represented stability, bankability, predictability. His routine was simple: morning meetings, script reviews, casting conversations, lunch with producers, afternoon discussions about upcoming Western projects. It was a system Wayne had lived inside for years, one that worked in his favor. And then, on one quiet October afternoon in 1965, something changed. Wayne was waiting in an adjacent office for a scheduled meeting. Nothing unusual, just another day at Paramount. Through the wall, he could hear an audition taking place in the next room. A young actor, nervous but confident, reading lines for a small Western role. Then, mid-scene, the audition stopped. A voice calm, matter-of-fact: "We don't have anything for your type right now." There was a pause. Papers rustled. A chair moved. Footsteps toward the door. Wayne didn't see what happened next, but he heard it. The quiet sound of someone leaving the room. And then silence. Wayne sat there for a moment. He didn't interrupt. He didn't ask questions. He didn't reveal he had heard anything at all. But according to later accounts, those few seconds stuck with him. Because in Hollywood, moments like that rarely left a record. No memo. No complaint. No headline. Just another actor walking out of another audition. But this time, someone powerful had heard it. And before the day was over, John Wayne would leave Paramount and start making calls that would quietly change the course of several careers. If you're enjoying stories like this, the ones Hollywood rarely talks about, consider subscribing. These are the moments that changed history quietly. Because what happened next, no one at Paramount saw coming. October 1965. Late afternoon. The Paramount offices had already begun to quiet down. Meetings were ending. Assistants were gathering scripts. Another ordinary Hollywood day was winding to a close. But inside his car, John Wayne wasn't heading home just yet. According to accounts that surfaced years later, Wayne sat for several minutes before starting the engine. The audition he had overheard replayed in his mind. The calm dismissal, the quiet footsteps, the silence afterward. He had spent years in Hollywood. He knew that what he heard wasn't unusual. That was exactly the problem. That evening, Wayne made his first phone call. He reached out to Andrew McLaglen, a director Wayne trusted and had worked with on multiple westerns. McLaglen later described Wayne as unusually direct. Wayne asked a simple question: how many black actors are getting auditions right now? McLaglen didn't know the exact number, but the answer wasn't encouraging. So Wayne made a second call, this time to Michael Wayne, who was working with Badjack Productions. Wayne asked him to quietly check with casting contacts, not publicly, not formally, just to find out what was happening. Then came the third call. Wayne contacted Charlton Heston, who at the time was serving as president of the Screen Actors Guild. Again, Wayne didn't mention the audition. He didn't mention William Foster. He asked only about access. How many black actors were getting called in? According to later accounts, the numbers were striking. Across the 5 major studios, fewer than 8 black actors were receiving auditions in a typical month, and most were for minor or background roles. Wayne now faced a decision. He could ignore what he had heard, like countless others had before, or he could step into something complicated, controversial, and potentially damaging to his own career. Because in 1965, Hollywood was cautious about change. Studios avoided risks. Producers worried about audiences. Executives guarded their formulas carefully. And Wayne, more than anyone, represented that formula. He was the face of traditional westerns, films that studios believed depended on familiar casting and predictable expectations. If Wayne pushed too hard, studios could resist. If he challenged casting practices, projects could stall. There was also the personal risk. Wayne's influence came from relationships, producers, directors, studio executives. Quietly challenging industry norms could strain those relationships. But doing nothing meant accepting what he had heard. The pressure built quickly. Over the next few days, Wayne gathered more information. Quiet conversations, informal questions, no official meetings, no public statements. Then, according to accounts revealed years later, Wayne made a decision not to confront the studios, not to give interviews, not to make speeches. Instead, he chose something far quieter and far more unexpected. He would create opportunities himself. What Wayne did next wasn't announced. There was no press release, no formal program, no public acknowledgement. But within weeks, a small number of actors began receiving unusual phone calls, paid screen tests, private auditions, opportunities that didn't officially exist. And behind it all, quietly funding the effort through Badjack Productions, was John Wayne. What no one realized at the time was how far he was willing to go, or how long he would keep it going. Because over the next 4 years, the quiet decision Wayne made in his car that October afternoon would ripple through Hollywood in ways no one expected. And when the truth finally surfaced decades later, it revealed that Wayne had taken a risk few stars of his stature ever would. But first, someone needed to make the first call. And that moment came sooner than anyone realized. What happened next was the move that changed everything. The first call came just days later. Inside the offices of Badjack Productions, Michael Wayne received instructions that were unusually specific and unusually quiet. His father didn't want announcements. He didn't want formal meetings. He didn't want studio involvement. He wanted screen tests, paid ones. Actors would be invited privately. They would read scenes. Cameras would roll. And regardless of whether they were cast immediately, they would leave with something rare in Hollywood at the time: professional footage and a paid opportunity. It was simple, and almost no one was doing it. Within the first week, a small list of names began forming. Casting contacts quietly passed along recommendations. Agents shared overlooked clients. A few actors were invited without even knowing who was behind it. One of them was 23-year-old William Foster. According to later interviews, Foster received a call offering a paid screen test. No studio name, no major project attached, just an opportunity to read for Western roles. He accepted immediately. When Foster arrived, The setup was modest but professional. A camera, a script, a small crew. No publicity, no executives watching. Just an audition, the kind he had struggled to get. Foster later recalled that the environment felt different. Less rushed, more deliberate. He was given time to run the scene multiple times. Direction was offered. Adjustments were made. For the first time, he wasn't being dismissed mid-audition. Behind the scenes, Wayne was monitoring the program quietly. He wasn't always present, but he reviewed footage, asked questions, and encouraged the team to keep inviting new actors. According to accounts shared years later, Wayne gave one consistent instruction: make sure they're paid. Their time matters. Word began spreading quietly among agents. Actors who had struggled to secure auditions were suddenly being invited to screen tests. No guarantees, no headlines, just opportunities. Within months, the list grew. 5 actors, then 12, then more. But Wayne's decision came with a cost. Each screen test required crew time, equipment, and compensation. None of it was reimbursed by studios. The program was being funded quietly through Badjack's internal budgets. By early 1966, the expenses had already begun to add up. And then, something else happened. Studios started noticing. Casting offices began receiving inquiries. Agents started referencing new footage. Producers began hearing about actors who suddenly had professional screen tests available. Wayne hadn't announced anything, but the ripple had started. And within a year, the quiet program Wayne began after overhearing one audition was expanding beyond what anyone expected. But what no one knew, not even most of the actors involved, was that Wayne intended to keep it going. Not for weeks, not for months, for years. High voltage, and by the time the 4th year ended, 31 actors had passed through the program. 3 would go on to major careers, and 1 would later describe it simply: a cowboy opened a door and never told anyone he did it. But the real impact of Wayne's decision wouldn't be seen immediately, because the years that followed would quietly reshape more than just a few careers. They would begin changing how auditions themselves were offered. And that's where the story takes its biggest turn. For years, almost no one knew the program even existed. Actors attended the screen tests. Agents received the footage. Casting directors began seeing new faces. But the connection to John Wayne remained hidden. Then, decades later, something surfaced. In 2004, during research for a documentary about Wayne's production company, members of the Wayne family reviewed internal files from Badjack Productions. Inside were a series of memos dated between 1965 and 1969. Lists of actors, screen test schedules, budget allocations, and one repeated note attached to multiple entries: do not publicize, do not attach Duke's name. The discovery changed how historians viewed the period, because it revealed that Wayne hadn't just supported a few actors informally. He had overseen a structured, multi-year effort and deliberately kept his involvement hidden. And suddenly, those quiet auditions from the late 1960s took on a very different meaning. What looked like coincidence was actually intention, and the full impact was only beginning to show. By 1966, the effects of the quiet program were becoming visible, even if no one knew why. Casting directors began seeing new audition reels. Agents started submitting actors with fresh screen footage. Producers were introduced to performers they hadn't seen before. The change was subtle but noticeable. Actors who once struggled to get in the room were now arriving with professional material. And in Hollywood, that made a difference. Over the next 4 years, the list continued to grow. By 1969, 31 actors had gone through the quiet screen test program, funded through Badjack. Some landed small roles. Others built steady careers. A few broke through into larger productions. Among them, William Foster began booking character roles, small at first, but consistent. One appearance led to another, then recurring roles, then steady work. By 1980, Foster had accumulated more than 40 screen credits, something that might never have happened without that first-page screen test. And he wasn't alone. Several actors from the program began appearing in westerns, television dramas, and supporting film roles throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s. Meanwhile, Wayne never spoke publicly about the effort. There were no interviews, no press mentions, no public credit. But the cost continued quietly. Each screen test required crew time, studio space, equipment, actor compensation. Over 4 years, the expenses added up. According to estimates shared in later interviews, Wayne personally funded dozens of paid auditions, all without studio reimbursement. At the same time, Wayne's career remained busy. He starred in major films like True Grit, which earned him an Academy Award. He continued producing projects, meeting with studios, and maintaining his status as one of Hollywood's biggest stars. But behind the scenes, the quiet program continued. Agents later recalled receiving occasional calls. "Can you send someone in?" No publicity. Paid screen test. The pattern stayed consistent. No fanfare. No announcements. Just opportunities. Over time, something else began happening. Casting directors grew more comfortable bringing in new talent. Producers began considering actors they might not have before. Slowly, the number of auditions expanded beyond Wayne's program. It wasn't a sudden shift, but a gradual one. And Wayne kept showing up behind the scenes. For 4 years, 31 actors, dozens of paid opportunities, no public recognition. Then, in 1969, the program quietly ended. There was no announcement, no closing memo. The screen test simply slowed, then stopped. By then, the ripple had already spread. Actors who had entered the industry through those early opportunities were now working steadily. New faces were appearing in casting offices more frequently. And Wayne moved on, never mentioning the effort publicly. Years passed. The story remained largely unknown. Until 1992, when William Foster was asked a simple question during an interview. "Who gave you your first real break?" Foster paused. Then he answered, "A cowboy who never took credit." And suddenly, the quiet effort from decades earlier began to surface. But the most powerful proof of what Wayne had done was still waiting to be discovered. And when it finally appeared, it confirmed everything. For decades, the story existed mostly as quiet recollections. Actors remembered the screen tests. Agents recalled the unexpected calls. A few industry insiders suspected Wayne's involvement, but there was no hard evidence. Until 2004, while reviewing archived materials for a retrospective documentary on John Wayne, the Wayne family granted researchers access to internal files from Badjack Productions. Inside the archive were folders labeled simply, "Screen Tests, 1965 to 1969. The contents were revealing. Typed memos, budget approvals, casting notes, actor lists. Over multiple documents, the same pattern appeared. Scheduled screen tests for actors not attached to any specific film project. Each test included compensation details and crew assignments. Then, on several memos, a handwritten instruction appeared. Short, direct, do not publicize. Keep internal. And most notably, do not attach Duke's name. Duke was Wayne's widely known nickname across Hollywood. The documents confirmed what many had only suspected. Wayne hadn't just supported a few actors casually. He had quietly funded and organized a structured program over 4 years. Researchers also found internal budget summaries showing repeated allocations for paid screen tests, all routed through Badjack. One memo dated 1967 listed multiple scheduled auditions across several weeks, further confirming the program wasn't a one-time effort, but an ongoing initiative. When historians and family members reviewed the documents, the timeline aligned with what actors like William Foster had described years earlier. The quiet auditions, the paid opportunities, the absence of publicity, it all matched. Later, members of Wayne's family reflected on the discovery. According to interviews conducted during the documentary research, some family members themselves had not been aware of the full extent of the program. Wayne had never spoken publicly about it. Not during interviews, not in speeches, not in memoirs. By the end of the 4-year period, 31 actors had gone through the program, dozens of paid screen tests had been funded, multiple careers had quietly begun, and Wayne had never taken credit. Today, those archived memos remain one of the clearest pieces of evidence of the quiet effort, a behind-the-scenes reminder that one decision made in a Paramount office in 1965 had ripple effects for years. But perhaps the most powerful part of the story wasn't the documents themselves. It was the silence that followed, because even after the discovery, Wayne still never claimed it, and that may have been the point all along. John Wayne built his career playing heroes on screen, lawmen, soldiers, cowboys who stepped in when something wasn't right. But in 1965, there were no cameras, no script, no audience, no recognition, just a moment in a hallway and a decision that no one saw. Wayne didn't hold a press conference. He didn't challenge studios publicly. He didn't try to change Hollywood overnight. Instead, he chose something quieter. He opened doors, one screen test at a time, one actor at a time, over 4 years, without ever asking for credit. In a world that often rewards visibility, Wayne chose anonymity. And that's what makes the story endure. Because the real impact wasn't measured in headlines, it was measured in careers. Actors who found opportunities, performers who stayed in the industry, doors that slowly opened wider. So here's the question. If you were in Wayne's position, would you have done the same? Would you invest years of time, money, and effort, knowing no one might ever know? Drop one word in the comments that describes what John Wayne did. Loyalty, integrity, leadership, courage. I read every single one. And if you enjoy stories like this, the ones Hollywood never advertised, consider subscribing. These are the quiet moments that shaped history. Because sometimes, legends aren't made on screen. They're made in the choices no one sees. And somewhere in those Badjack archives, those memos still exist. A reminder that one cowboy heard something in 1965 and decided to do something about it. Next time, the day a Hollywood legend refused $1 million role, and the quiet reason shocked everyone. See you in the next story.